Welcome to Straight Talk. With Christmas just around the corner, we ask, where has the year gone, and take stock as we prepare to leap into 2011. For our final show of 2010, we explore the agricultural issues which have made a big impact in 2010 and look set to have an even bigger influence in the coming year. Drought worries, particularly in dairying areas in the upper half of the North Island, are set to put a dent in what promised to be a very good income year for many farmers, especially after Fonterra increased its payout forecast just last week. How will farmers cope? And what can the agricultural servicing industries expect as fallout? The government's moved on foreign ownership of farmland, giving more guidelines to the Overseas Investment Office. While federated farmers might be happy, 2011 is election year and Winston Peters is waiting in the wings. Will the logjam that's been the rural property market for most of the year free up any time soon? And the New Zealand Institute of Economic Research report on just how important dairying is to the economy won't surprise farmers. But how about the rest of the country? Today I'm joined by former Federated Farmers Vice President Malcolm Lumsden and freelance journalist Keith Stewart. Welcome. Now Malcolm, the drought down your way, things are looking pretty serious.
Oh, they are. We had a 14% moisture deficit at this time last year. We currently have an 87% moisture deficit. I think that Northland is again hard hit, and I feel very sorry for the smaller farmers up there. Some of the larger farmers we can cope, but it is becoming very difficult. How
widespread is the drought situation in the Waikato? I know in previous droughts there were certain areas that fared just a little bit better. They did get a few showers coming through, but this time it looks to be pretty general? It's very general, and the biggest problem is that there's no supplements available of any extent. The farmers haven't recovered from the 08 drought. So particularly in the North Waikato, again, it's been hit hard like it was last year. Right. And even if farmers wanted to buy supplements, if they were available, their banks might be saying, look, the money's not available to be doing that. The banks are constrained by the changes in the rules, and I know the Minister is in the Waikato today. The Minister is watching and discussing with the banks where they go, and that'll be all under review. Right. Now, Keith, how do you see the whole situation panning out? It's likely to be a pretty big dent to servicing industries and the national economy, isn't it? Oh, without question. I mean, I think, you know, we get the announcement from Fonterra that there's a 30-cent increase, but I guess we lost it immediately because of in terms of the filter down, and also for farmers. I mean, if they're buying more supplementary feed, and if they can get it. I know where I am, you know, the trucks have been rolling for the last 3 weeks, which seems kind of crazy time of the year to be getting hay and silage and stuff in. So I guess economically, it's one step forward, two back with this particular. And you know, is this the pattern for the future? Will we be getting? I mean, this is 4 years in a row we've had droughts now. And I guess this is the question, Malcolm, that perhaps some urban dwellers would ask. You know, farmers should be adjusting to the fact that we've got these climate change situations. This does look to be a pronounced weather pattern now. Well, I think it's too early to tell. I think most farmers have adjusted and most have reduced stock levels this year. But we have to farm for an average year. We can't farm for the worst year, so therein lies the dilemma. Right. So how well prepared are most farmers? Have they farmed reasonably conservatively since the last droughts, like putting in more maize, perhaps ordering more palm kernel earlier in the season, those sorts of strategies? Well, yes, except that all the turnip and chicory crops in the Waikato haven't struck. So therein we've got a lot of bare paddocks. Some of the maize crops are now suffering quite substantial drought stress, so it's an ongoing thing. On the other side, I think management levels are good. Most surplus stock has been sold, and in fact a lot of people didn't replace additional stock when they sold off last year. So that put them in a better position there? They are, yes. I guess the situation is made worse for Northland dairy farmers in particular, because they generally don't grow crops to the same extent, do they? They don't have the possibility of, with a lot of land that they're farming, it's not suitable or climate-wise. So what will they be relying on to get through?
Well, I think they'll be relying on getting some rain. I think, you know, Northland is a difficult area to farm. Traditionally, there are smaller farmers, not the large units, and they don't have that summer growing ability. They tend to rely on a early spring and good entrance into the summer. And this year they've been penalised in that respect.
Right. So, Keith, in the future, could you see that perhaps with climate change, with some of the events we're looking at now, we might not see that much dairying perhaps in Northland? We might actually be looking at quite a different structure of cropping and farming types throughout New Zealand.
I think so. I think that's fundamentally what will change. I mean, if this is the pattern for the future, then we'll see different land use, and we have to. You know, we can't continue doing what we were doing before if there is a substantial change in climate, and that's logical. Farmers themselves will work that out pretty quickly. Yeah,
absolutely. But what about the likes of Fonterra, Malcolm? Are they up with the play enough in terms of making the right moves as regards their shareholders and suppliers if some of these changes do need to take place?
Oh, absolutely. And I think some of the changes that take place will need the support of the whole community. I think in particular water harvesting is going to have to be looked at more strongly in Northland, and that's going to require a considerable change of attitude on the behalf of councils. I think Fonterra is doing okay, it's increased its payout, but then you've got to have milk to sell to get paid, and that's the
right,
issue.
Yeah. And they'd be very pleased with their huge investment down in Edendale earlier this year. In terms of the likely milk flows down in Southland this year, I would imagine.
Oh, Fonterra will be very happy about that. But Waikato is still the set piece. Waikato still produces the most milk, closely followed by Canterbury and then Southland. So
we weren't looking to take anything away from you, Malcolm, don't worry. Now, moving on to foreign land sales. Where do you see this issue going, Keith? We've talked about this before. The saga's not over yet, is it?
Don't ask me, ask Winston.
Do you think he's in the drive? He is.
He's in the driver's seat, without any question. I mean, basically, he only missed out. I mean, he got more votes than ACT last time. So we're not. He doesn't have to get much to be back in play, and we know what he thinks about it, and that's a big issue. I just know from my radio program the amount of public interest in overseas ownership of New Zealand land is very, very high, and he'll tap into that, and it will become an election issue.
What do you think, Malcolm? You've been involved in political parties before.
Yes.
Do you think that the whole issue might see the beginning of a new political party?
No, I don't think so, but I think it's going to see a hell of a lot of pressure come upon the current MPs. And I go back to the days when I made my speech to Stand Federated Farmers, and I said land ownership is an issue we can afford to be emotional about. And I think that's the point. The point is that most New Zealanders feel emotional about the issue. Our politicians see it in a different commercial light, and I think there's going to be a reckoning of the ways.
Right. How do you see the Save the Farms lobby group progressing from here? Do you think they might fall in behind Winston Peters, or would that be an unlikely marriage?
I think it's too early to tell. I think they are having an effect on political opinion, and that's got to be good. I have very strong views on foreign ownership of land, and so therefore it's good to see them active.
What do you see coming up, Keith, from, well, before the beginning of the election campaign, I guess, in 2011? There'll be a lot more mobilisation of interest groups on this issue?
I think this is going to be a very big issue, and the other side of it is the Pacific Partnership. What are the deals that we're jacking up there? Everybody keeps telling us that dairying is on the table. We're dreaming. There is no way in the world that the Americans are putting dairying on the table. We all know the realities of that situation. There will be no change.
So do you think there'll be a closer look taken by the general public at free trade agreements?
Absolutely.
Rather than saying, yes, they have to be good for us?
Because what's going to become very clear is that those free trade agreements are one of the reasons why the Chinese, for example, are in here feeling that they can buy whatever land they like. We have an agreement that was signed without going through Parliament by the last government. We've got to be very, very careful we don't tie ourselves into those sorts of relationships in the future.
Right.
And once New Zealanders know about them, I think we're going to see some very angry citizens.
Right. Well, we'll see how that plays out. Coming up after the break, we get out the crystal ball and speculate on the future of rural real estate. 2010 is a year many agents and farmers will want to forget. What's likely to happen in 2011? And will Mei Wang's bankruptcy mean an end to the controversial Chinese bid for some of Alan Crafer's farms? Stay with us to find out. Welcome back to Straight Talk. Now it's on to You Said It, hot topics in the ag media we want to discuss further. Now, Malcolm, rural real estate, 2010, not been a good year. 2011, what do you see coming up?
Well, it's not a good year for real estate agents.
No.
Lowest sales on record. There's got to be a settling out, and I think there is a bottom appearing. It's going to be interesting. Yeah.
OK. Well, Keith, one thing that might put bottom in the market, if you like, is Mei Wang and the Crafer Farms. What do you see happening here in 2010?
She's got to be the toughest woman I've ever seen.
She's a hard cookie.
I don't think it'll proceed. I mean, I noticed that sort of some of the support voices in the background have faded somewhat around this particular time. I think this was the hurdle she had to clear. But then again, who knows? You know, I would imagine if the Chinese are very serious, and they may well be,
they could find another way.
In. And we still have Jenny Shipley in the background there.
Yes.
And she's a powerful woman to be reckoned with as well. And they might be just using her as the insider to make it happen. So we'll wait and see. You never know till you know with the Chinese.
Absolutely. What do you think, Malcolm? Do you think Landcorp's got another shot at the prize coming up?
Well, Landcorp put in what was a realistic bid, and really it's up to the receivers to look at where they are. In fact, land prices have dropped since Landcorp put in their bid, so yeah, I'd like to see Landcorp in there.
Yeah, you think they'd stick with the price that they came up with? They wouldn't try and haggle a bit and say, as you say, prices have dropped, give us a better price?
Kelly, the chairman of Landcorp, is very astute, and they wouldn't have put in a frivolous bid.
No. OK, good one. Well, moving on. The Institute of Economic Research report on the value of dairying to the economy, Keith, no surprise to farmers, but do you think some urban New Zealanders might be surprised just what a player dairying and Fonterra is when it comes to the overall fortunes of the country?
Don't think so.
No.
I mean, it's pretty obvious that if we are doing our economic rationalisation on the basis of export, you have to say that we would be a disaster without dairying right now. We don't have anything the rest of the world wants. Well, we do. We have land, but we don't have enough of them.
But, yeah.
You know, I mean, this is the problem that we have. The dairying is really the fallback position, and we just have to hope that it continues. And if the droughts continue like they are, it might not be as good as we're looking. And I would say that we've got to consider very seriously what Morris said earlier on about the harvesting of water, because effectively what we are selling to the other side of the world is not milk, it's water.
Yeah.
You know, and if you look at China, for example, I mean, the estimates in China are that they don't have enough water to survive now, unless they make some huge differences to their agricultural practice. So they're looking here as well. So.
Okay. Getting back to the image of the dairy industry, Malcolm, the Dairy NZ ads on TV giving a fresh approach, if you like, to dairying. How successful do you think they've been?
Well, I hope they are successful, and I can't judge that, but I think it's refreshing. We've got to put our best foot forward, and I'm pleased to see that happening.
What do you think, Keith? Do you think that they'll strike a chord with urban New Zealanders, make them think more fondly of dairy farmers?
No.
No, OK.
I don't think it'll make any difference at all.
No, OK, so not money well spent.
Well, for a lot of people, they look at it and say, oh, that's what 61 cents for a pack of butter goes for.
Ah, right.
Smart ads and glossy magazines. I saw two before I came in here flicking through. And they always do the summary of how much ad revenue is there.
Yeah.
Big chunk of it from the dairy industry. I'd rather be seeing that coming in forms of butter, cream, the advertising for food products, or initiatives that are getting New Zealanders more proud of their food products rather than just saying, aren't we clever farmers?
Yeah. Do you agree with that, Malcolm, as a producer?
I don't disagree with it.
No,
yes.
no.
I still think the whole attitude towards dairying is a multitask approach, and I think we've got to start getting these kids in schools educated about what happens on farms. Otherwise, we're going to have a public that continues to bite the hand that feeds them, and that's the biggest danger for dairying.
We do not want that, no. Well, moving on to the UN climate change talks in Cancun. Little was expected, and that was the result.
Even less was, I'd have to say, was a disaster.
Yeah, what's the point of this, Keith? We're fiddling while Rome burns, aren't we?
Well, nobody's taking it seriously. We don't see it as being the biggest issue in the world. I mean, look at New Zealand. The Greens don't get any votes. New Zealanders think if we ignore it, if we shut one eye and put a hand over the other one, climate change is going to go away. And we know fundamentally it's not. We can see that now. If the changes that are happening to New Zealand's climate now are a consequence of global climate change, look what's happening in the UK.
And in Australia,
and
in Australia, floods in New South Wales.
I mean, the early season cherries were wiped out in one of the driest parts of Australia. I mean, it's just crazy, you know.
But Malcolm, I would venture to suggest that climate change naysayers are they're more prolific amongst the farming fraternity than perhaps other groups, aren't they? Well,
farmers have lived by the weather for years, and I think we accept that there is a changing climate. The question is whether human intervention is creating that change, and that's where the issue lies. There's no denial of the fact that the climate is changing.
Right, but is that a good platform to move forward on when definitely, as Keith says, something needs to be done, and you've still got sceptics saying, hold on a minute, maybe this isn't so serious after all?
Well, when I do the calculations on my farm and see that I'll be paying between $25,000 and $50,000 a year for the carbon tax in 2015, I've got to ask, is that going to be a wise investment? Is that going to solve the problem? And I think that's the issue. There are too many people running around with solutions they're suggesting that may not be the panacea.
Right, OK. Keith, looking to the election year coming up, do you think there's likely to be any change to the emission trading scheme or anything put forward whereby perhaps the government will seek to soften its stance? It's had a pretty hard time of it recently.
It depends on what happens between now and the election, essentially. The government is exposed by the resurrection of Winston, and so the chances of a centre-left coalition rather than a centre-right coalition are very high. And I guess it depends on what sort of fighting happens. We know that the election before last, the iwi-kiwi posturing of the National Party substantially changed the way the government reacted and changed the whole nature of the election and of subsequent government. And a similar situation could happen if there is a major realisation of what is going on with the world. You know, one of the sneaky things that that's sort of slipped under the radar and nobody's talked about, and I think every farmer in New Zealand should be seriously concerned about it, is that the major oil companies have now acknowledged we're past peak oil. We're now on the downward slope. We will see over this Christmas holidays petrol prices past $2 again, and I doubt whether they'll go south of $2 ever again in our lifetimes. We are facing a dramatic change now. If that pressure starts to build next year, average New Zealanders will start saying, hey, just a minute, we might need to be doing something about this.
Yeah. Do you think that's going to make that sort of difference, Malcolm?
Oh, absolutely. I think that there's a whole range of things that farmers are looking at. Thinking farmers, you know, we're looking at the doubling of the cost of fertiliser. We're looking at, when you look at the oil price, of course, you're looking at the palm kernel and the transport costs on that.
Absolutely.
So that's not sustainable. I've always said that when we're importing feed, it's not sustainable.
Do you think we'll see a return to the days of biodigesters on farms, as we saw back in the early 1980s after the oil price shocks?
Well, there are biodigesters on farms now, but the problem is they're not quite economic.
No, but...
but when, you know, we start paying $3.50 a litre for petrol and $3 for diesel, I think there's going to be a change of attitude. People's
certainly their attitude will change pretty markedly there.
And my view is, and I think Keith would share that view, is that by 2015 that's what we'll be seeing.
Absolutely. Well, there's no question about that.
Right. All right. Well, the pick is with you. After the break, it's You Beauty or a Bullocking. See which way the awards fall when we return. Stay tuned. Welcome Welcome back to Straight Talk. Now it's on to you beauty, praise or a bollocking, the opposite. Malcolm, what would you have for us this week?
Oh, it's got to be Fonterra. As a shareholder, you know, I can pick up the phone and ring the chairman at any stage, and I have done. Fonterra is going well.
Yeah, so that's a beauty.
Yeah.
Yeah. What do you think has marked out 2010 for Fonterra as being their big success points?
Oh, the bureaucrats in Wellington and the politicians wanting to rake up the Dairy Industry Regulation Act. And there are some bureaucrats down there that believe we need to get Fonterra back to processing no more than 50% of New Zealand's milk.
So that's a bollocking for them.
Oh, talk about biting the hand that feeds us.
What do you think is going to change the situation there? Fonterra has been pretty strong in its lobbying, well backed by farmers.
Well, with good reason. The public should look and say, why are we giving cheap milk to these other processing companies who in return may be not producing products of the value that Fonterra could do with that milk? And that's the question.
Right. What do you think, Keith? Do you think the general public have a good understanding of the fact that these regulations were set up when Fonterra was formed to provide some competition in the industry, and that's exactly what's happened? No,
I don't think the general public think that at all. The only thing the general public ever think about dairying is how much it costs when you go to the supermarket. Yes. I think we have to be very careful about the way there's two problems here. I think it's crazy when you oblige a company to give away an advantage, but we also have to be very careful that we're not locking ourselves into a monopoly situation where innovative ideas are constrained by a big company that sees them as opposition. So it's a difficult area, but I don't think the present set of legislation we have is smart at all.
No. Okay. Malcolm, with Fonterra being set up back in 2001, 9 years on, almost 10 years on, how do you think it's performed in terms of how the regulations that the government passed at the time of its formation were framed? Has it done pretty well?
I think Fonterra has produced the goods. It really has. And how can we knock it when we're looking at the performance? If Fonterra hadn't performed, we wouldn't be in as good a position we are in this downturn.
Right. And do you think its competitors have performed as well? I mean, that was the whole point of the regulations, to give those guys a sort of a step up and really get them out there being able to compete.
Well, I can't judge that. I think we've got to look at the income they've produced. For example, Westland goes very well. It's a good company. Tatua does very well. But I think, you know, with May Wang setting up a factory to take milk off Fonterra in Tauranga, we've got to ask the question. This is a nonsense. I mean, so I've got one supermarket in my town. It doesn't, if I want to set up a grocery shop in opposition, the government doesn't require them to supply me cheap products so I can compete against them. That's the nonsense of the whole thing. Right.
Keith, do you think that consumers enjoy the fact that they can buy this different range of products? For example, open country cheese and so forth, Kaimai cheese. Do you think that makes a difference to their perception of the breadth and width of the dairy industry in New Zealand?
No. Most of those companies are incidental. I mean, they're doing Fonterra copycats. You know, the real innovation's coming with the small cheese producers who in essence, are sourcing their own stuff mostly anyway. And so the constraint on innovation that I was talking about before is actually coming from these setups who are trying to copy Fonterra. They want the cheapest milk supply they can get, and the only way they're going to get that is by calling in the law that demands that Fonterra give it to them, and I think that's ridiculous.
Well, talking of innovation, I believe you've got a beauty this week for us, Keith, and it's all about innovation.
Well, yeah, my beauty is the farmers' markets, and I think we've got to keep remembering that they are the farmers' markets, and I love the innovation that's coming in. When farmers' markets first started, there was a little bit of a ho-hum, and there's a tendency that what I call them is, you know, corner shops and Remuera front yards, you know, ladies playing fancy food, and that's not what it should be about. It should be about a financial opportunity, a business opportunity for farmers who want to be innovative. They might want to grow saffron, for example, and that gives them an outlet, and it gives them the opportunity to do things at a scale and probably at a quality level that the supermarkets would never indulge.
And there's the huge plus, isn't there, Malcolm, of the consumer being able to actually talk to the producer one-on-one.
Absolutely.
Say, how is this produced? What are you doing?
I agree with Keith. You know, I enjoy nothing more than walking through some of these markets. It's just inspirational. And that contact directly with the grower is most important. That's the future.
Yeah, good one. Well, I have a you beauty. For all you Country 99 TV viewers who've watched the program and given me your feedback when I've met up with you. Your support has been very much appreciated. Sadly, this will be my last straight talk. I couldn't leave without thanking all my guests who've made their time and viewpoints available, and the hard-working production crew without whom the program wouldn't get to air. I'll miss you all. It's been a pleasure. That's all we have time for. Thanks to my guests, Malcolm Lumsden, former Vice President of Federated Farmers, and freelance journalist Keith Stewart. And thanks to you for watching. I wish you all a very Merry Christmas and a Happy New Year. May 2011 be your best yet.